Okay, so I'm with Shawn Wells. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk about your book and all your expertise. And we share a lot of similar viewpoints on things, and I love to bring people on the show who can sort of kind of reiterate what I'm talking about and get an outsider's perspective of why this all makes sense and why I'm sort of recommending the things that I do. Because sometimes these things sound a little crazy, a little backwards, kind of like the exact opposite of what we've been taught. So, things about bioindividuality, self experimentation, these are things that I'm talking about constantly. I always say, I don't know the answer. You have to figure it out yourself. And I know that you share that viewpoint as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like anyone that has like one size fits all or even like scientific proof or fact, like as a scientist, whenever I hear those terms, I know it's marketing.
Yeah.
Like because a good scientific study always ends with, we had these specific parameters and we have these statistical averages, and there was these super responders and non-responders, and it was in like kind of a narrow window of an experimental group of 18 to 24-year-old college age males that were athletic. So directionally we're saying this, but more research needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like that's how like a good study ends. There's no like it's a scientific fact or it's scientific proof. So like even in a study with a very narrow window of people, there's still what's called hyper or super responders or non-responders, and then there's an average in between, but that doesn't mean that's how it's going to work for you. So in the book, like even though I do intermittent fasting and high intensity interval training and keto and paleo and all these things, those things may not work for someone else. And so that's why in the book, like I feel like I stay, ambivalent to what it is that you will be doing. I just want you to do it and find the proper what's called hormetic stressors for you to adapt, to grow, to be stronger, to be more resilient.
Yeah, I love the word hormesis. It's like my favorite word. I learned it from podcasts and things. So, can you describe a little bit about what hormesis is and what is a hormetic stressor?
Yeah, so hormesis is the idea that we are a dynamic organism and we need a certain amount of stress or agitation to grow stronger, to be more resilient. And in our body, we have something that's called allostatic load. And basically, that's our stress bucket, if you will. It's our capacity for stress. And we used to be more resilient. We used to be more anti fragile, harder to kill, if you will, in the
Yeah.
past, where we had a bigger bucket, we had more resilience. But now, because we're thermically controlled with our temperature all day long, we're at 68 to 72 degrees. We're eating every 2 or 3 hours instead of going a day or 2 days looking for food, trying to find food, or maybe not having the availability of food like Grubhub and Uber Eats and convenience stores and all the things. And we had food that was more whole food than, this ultra processed food and bliss point food. And we got more exposure to the elements and to different types of radiation, when we're outside, and we were exposed to animals and having to hunt them or run from them and all of these things, like having to travel great distances or all of these kinds of things that were stressors. And good stress is called eustress, EU stress. And that's the idea of a hormetic stress, that it's something that causes growth or adaptation. And there's an idea in the book, there's like a bell curve. And on one side, there's eustress, this EU stress. On the other side, there's distress. And in the middle, in the meat of the bell curve, is the Goldilocks zone. And that's the ideal amount of stress, the ideal amount of agitation, if you will, to create the greatest amount of adaptation. And so that is hormetic stress. That's the idea of increasing your resilience, increasing that stress bucket size so that we can be stronger, that we can do these small amounts of stress so that when real stress comes, we're ready. That's the idea, that like we chase ease so that we don't have periods of dis-ease, right? That, but we have in between these states of ease, we need the states of small windows of dis-ease, like not like chronic windows of dis-ease. So that's the idea, that like we we have small periods of dis-ease so that we get stronger. But when it's too much too often, that's the problem. And that's the problem with just us being stressed out and distracted and not getting enough sleep, and a lot of the stresses we're putting on ourselves that are making it difficult for us to deal with other stresses in our lives. And
Yeah.
that's why, like, we even go to the gym and we do a little bit and we're overtrained, or we try and do a cold plunge and it's just too much for us. And it can be that way, where that thing that should be a eustress is a distress. So that's kind of the breakdown.
Yeah, that's great. So things like going to the gym, things like a sauna or a cold plunge, these are things that you would describe as potential hormetic stressors, right? And we would
For
maybe
sure.
say potential, yeah, because if someone is under low grade chronic stress for a long time, their stress bucket might be already extremely filled, right? And then so that stressor would be too much. It would make their bucket overflow. So I tell people, I have clients who have depleted adrenals, they're super stressed out and they're wanting to go to the gym and work out really hard all the time. And I said that, exercise can be a beneficial stressor, but I wouldn't tell someone with a sprained ankle like go to the gym because it's healthy for you. It's their body can't tolerate that level of stress at that point. So, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And so, what are some other examples of these hormetic potential beneficial stressors that you might recommend that someone maybe try on if they're feeling up for it?
Yeah, so going back to just even the temperature kind of stuff. So cold plunges, cold showers, doing hot showers, that's not too hard for most people. But if you do what's called contrasting, where you go hot to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold, that creates an even greater delta between the temperatures and therefore creates greater adaptation. And it's kind of like that polar bear club, like that I think the
Hmm.
old guys used to do in Sweden or something like that, where like they'd be in the saunas and then they'd jump in the hole in the ice and that kind of stuff. Like that's the idea, like where you go from one extreme to the other. And to your point that we were just talking about, if someone that had never done something like that, that could be too much.
Yeah.
That could be too shocking to the system. So that's the kind of thing that you do build up to. But doing, even there's data on like just cool showers, just like 60 or 65 degrees, even in a pool, they've shown that that upregulates brown adipose tissue, which is the fat burning fat on your body. So that fat, there's only about 6 to 7 ounces of this brown adipose tissue, which is brown because it's mitochondrial dense, and it's burning fat all the time. And it's the kind of thing that like it could be like the great equalizer. Like one of the reasons like some people can eat whatever they want but like stay lean, it's being researched a lot. Like there's a lot of like pharmaceutical energy that's getting put into brown adipose tissue. It's almost like a holy grail, if you will.
Wow.
And so they're looking into like even like what's called browning or beiging white adipose tissue, which is about 99.5% of your fat on your body, to make it this metabolically active one. So doing this cold exposure is going to upregulate your metabolism because your body is trying to figure out a way to warm itself up. And so this is why it's called like cold thermogenesis. It's warming your body up. And as a matter of fact, we actually have it. One of the reasons we have it is when we're a baby, it's like at 6 to 9 months that like we have the ability to shiver to generate heat. But before that point, we can't shiver. So we have our brown adipose tissue to tap into to maintain body temperature.
Wow, I haven't heard that before. That's so, so interesting. I have heard about that brown fat, and that's such a great way that, in your own shower, you can start working on these things. Not so much here in Florida where the water just never gets that cold, but maybe maybe it'll get to 65 degrees. Yeah, and then with the saunas, there's like the heat shock proteins. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yep. So exactly with saunas, it's both. Like what's cool is there's with the cold exposure, it's a lot of not only the fat burning and the cold thermogenesis, but anti-inflammation. And on the other side, with the saunas, you're exactly right. The heat shock proteins that are anabolic, that are fat burning as well, because again, you're expending energy to maintain body temperature. You're cooling your body down in that case, but you're upregulating a lot of anabolic hormones, a lot. Like the data is insane on like increases in testosterone, which is good for men and women if you're
Yep.
trying to maintain lean body mass and you like a healthy libido, et cetera, et cetera. And it's antidepressive, it's protective to bone, but also like GH growth hormone, which is potently anti-aging. It dramatic like 10x, like some of the data shows, like it's dramatic how much it increases growth hormone. So that's going to be not only anti-aging but restorative and healing, revitalizing, to your body and then on a number of fronts. So also like insulin, like growth factor, IGF-1, and just a number of these anabolic hormones it's affecting. So definitely the idea of getting both is great. That we are supposed to have this kind of exposure, and you do see, people that do this like have greater youthfulness, greater energy, more fat burning. So it's a powerful thing. There is a protocol, like I mentioned in the book, by this astronaut Cronise, that he talks about that contrasting shower technique where you're going back and forth like every 30 seconds, hot to cold, as a really potent technique to do this. That, if you don't have access to cold plunges and hot saunas and all these things, that you can at least do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good because it's a nice takeaway for people who don't have access and want to get started with this because of all those benefits. And even just starting to, like, kind of the word that's sort of coming to mind as we're talking about all these things is that our modern society, we got too comfortable. Everything is just like we sleep on these cushy beds and we're sitting all day long and we're temperature controlled. And so I'm guessing that one of the main messages that you're putting out is we need to expose our body to discomfort. So, pushing ourselves in a workout and being at these hot and cold temperatures where we don't feel comfortable. And that's sort of the name of the game because this modern cushy lifestyle has really kind of, I think, taken away our ability to adapt because everything's just perfect. What do we need to do? There's no stress on us. So,
Exactly. And then we atrophy from that. When,
mhm.
what you don't use, you lose. And it's exactly it. When we're so comfortable, there's no reason to adapt. But the problem is when stress does come, then we're not ready for it. We don't have the capacity for it. And, it's that resiliency that protects us and ultimately gives us the greater comfort. So
Mhm.
it's a nuanced thought of like how you again want to chase ease, but also put yourself in those temporary moments of dis-ease. So you don't want to be too chronically stressed, but I think the key is to find like a variety of stressors. And there's a stress in and of that, like in being like, it's almost like being, I guess, like adapted for almost anything. It's kind of like the metabolic flexibility, right? Like your dual fuel.
Yeah.
Like it's the same idea with like someone that, can travel and take on a new language and put themselves in a situation of like a crowd and being able to network, also be exposed to hot and cold and to, a variety of things, of going 2 days without eating. And, this is someone that has incredible flexibility. And you will find that, great leaders like, let's say, an Elon Musk or a LeBron James or whoever these people are that we look up to, they have this capacity often to deal with a variety of stressors. They get stress coming from so many directions, and they get so much criticism, and they're put in positions of leadership where they often fail. But they're also expert reframers, which is definitely a signature to people that are successful. And that is a resilient mind. How do I reframe this? How do I take that and make it something that's usable that I can bounce back from?
Love that. That's such a great important sort of message to get out of all of this, is that we are sort of, people are maybe start changing their lifestyle. They get a diagnosis and there's something wrong. And so they start with their diet and, they need to change their food, but it doesn't end there. The diet is just one of the things that is just one of these pieces of the puzzle. Of course, it's hugely important, but I feel like a lot of people get so stuck there. They get stuck with the macros. They get stuck with, what should this be? And, I'm talking about, like, let's look at digestion, let's look at your sleep, let's look at your stress level. And I am prescribing people to do breathing exercises as part of their protocol. And they're like, I thought I was coming to you because, you needed to help me with keto. I'm like, this is helping, So these are the things that are really going to help move the needle, because at the end of the day you could be eating the most healthy diet ever, but if you aren't controlling your stress, you're living this cushy life that you never get out of, you never get any of those hormetic stressors, you're not going to be resilient. And I love that idea that, of the reframing. That's really helpful. And then the other thing that you mentioned and is in your book, you said that much of our stress comes from being distracted. And I
Mm.
find that I am very easily distracted. And this is something that I've been wanting to work on. So can you talk about that a little bit? I find it so interesting.
So much so, yes. Like Cal Newport has a book called Deep Work, where he recommends that for 2 hours a day, like in the morning, that you're going deep in focused work that's non-distracted, so you don't have the notifications, the text messages, the emails, people walking in and out, the Facebook, the Instagram, whatever, and you have 2 hours of undistracted work. In that period of time, you will get more done than most people do in their 8 to 10 hour day, because you are focused. And no one, not even this myth of like women are better at multitasking, no one's good at multitasking, is a lie. It's a lie. We have something that we do called task switching. We are going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That's what gets our attention. And we focus on one thing and then we switch to another. And it can take 2 to 5 minutes to refocus fully on the other thing. And so if we're distracted, we're never really productive. And we can stay busy and stressed the entire day, but never really accomplish much or get that positive eustress. We're just burnt out. We're using a lot of brain energy, by the way, which is why you will feel that brain fog and fatigue, because you're just burning brain glucose or ketones the whole day, and you're not really accomplishing much of anything.
I feel very called out right now, by the way, but I'm really glad that you're saying this, because sometimes I just need to hear, I'm a person who needs to hear the why behind things and then hear all those benefits. And I'm like, all right, I'm sold. It's 2 hours is going to be in my schedule, because I find that I'm so distracted because I'm constantly switching tasks and I try to avoid it, but it's a really hard thing to do. So it's a matter of maybe setting up your lifestyle, turning off those notifications, phone is not in the same room, and you just go for it. So I love that.
There's some other books that are really good on this too. Tim Ferriss's The 4 Hour
For
Work
our work
Week.
week.
He goes into that you do like batching, is
Hmm.
the idea that you do like in the morning you might do this Cal Newport deep work, because
Yeah.
it's actually been shown like that's a time that you're very productive. Around 10 o'clock is actually your most creative. So maybe you do your deep work from 8 to 10, 10 to noon, You have your creative work to journal, to think of things, like block that time off, like to come up with new ideas for your business, leave that for you. And then in the afternoon, like he talks about like batching phone calls together. So like he liked to walk around and take all of his phone calls and not have that time like where he's going back and forth between trying to do deep work and phone calls and deep work and phone calls. And he also talks about that you don't do your emails all day long because again, that's distraction and you go down these rabbit holes. Tim Ferriss talks about just checking your emails at 2 times a day intervals. And if people have an emergency, they can, text you or find another way potentially, but or call you. Maybe you can just do like something on your phone where you have do not disturb, but like if someone calls twice, they can get through. But
Yeah.
you just do twice a day where again, you're batching your emails. That's the whole point, is that you're batching things. There's also like another technique that's called the Pomodoro technique. That's a little bit shorter,
Yeah.
where every hour you have
It's
some
my
focus
timer.
time. Yeah, there you go. And
Mm-hmm.
then that you do get up and do some exercise potentially. So I actually have in my hidden chapter, if you go to energyformula.com, once you buy the book, I have a whole hidden chapter on natural movement, ancestral movement, and also this idea, this new research on exercise snacks. And this idea is that every hour you're finding like 5 minutes or something like that to move your body. And they've shown that's far more effective than that 45 minutes to an hour of working out a day when you're sedentary in a chair or in a car or on the couch the rest of the day. It doesn't undo that whole sitting syndrome, the lack of circulation and lymph moving. And they've actually shown that a lot of your tissues like kind of become less plastic, less mobile. Like so, like your fascia, your muscle, even your fat, like the way your bone is modeled, like all of it becomes set up in such a way to hold you stable in your sitting position or in your laying position. You become less dynamic because you're not moving your body like you should. So I like the Pomodoro technique is kind of cool, that you take time to exercise your eyes, to not be looking at screens, take times to move your body, and also to get some breath work in and then go back in and refocus. So those are things that would be ideal.
Love that. That's so good. I even have like a little rebounder in here. And so sometimes
Mm,
between clients, I'll just like jump, move my lymph, do all that. And my wife is a mobility instructor for functional range conditioning. Not sure if you're familiar with it. And so just
mhm.
doing some cars where you rotate your joints, like moving, getting out of those positions. The only bad position is one that you're in too long. That's what I've learned from her. So
Yes.
yeah, so being in these positions too long is a huge problem. So, and I love that you talked about breaking up the workout. So I like that idea of like the exercise snacks, the only snack I'll recommend. And and I actually saw a study on that where it's actually better for your glucose levels as well. So there's of course there's going to be a myriad of benefits to anything relating to exercise. Um, I know in the book you talk about that one of the single most important factors for how long you live is actually your muscular strength. So in
Mm.
addition to, exercise being good for to help, alert us during and, not being in the same position all the time, can you talk a little bit about that in the longevity aspect?
In terms of physicality of like things that we can directly measure, grip strength is the best indicator of longevity. And there's so much nuance to that idea. It goes a lot deeper than just having strength in your hand, because it's predictive of you having the ability, the dexterity in your hand, the muscle innervation, the nimbleness, if you will, and also again, yeah, that muscle strength, that you don't have the arthritis, that you have strength in your forearm, and you can manifest that. And so there's a lot to like an idea of grip strength, and it tends to be also that the more easily you can recruit muscle and you have muscle, that you also have higher bone mineral density. And then, of course, you're going to have a higher quality of life because you have improved activities of daily living, ADLs. Like
Hmm.
you can do more
Yeah.
essentially in life. So your quality of life is better. So grip strength is like indicative of so much more than just how well you can grip something.
Yeah.
Uh, but what's cool is deeper than that, than just grip strength and longevity. There's actually a better indicator, according to the 80-year plus Harvard study, that's the greatest study of all time now. The number one predictor of longevity, and they've looked at generations of people, male, female, socioeconomic status, geographic location, cholesterol, genetics, all these things. The number one predictor of longevity is quality of relationships.
Wow. That
And
is so
that's why, like, if you
fascinating.
go to these, yeah, if you go to these blue zones like Sardinia or whatever, it's not that they're doing coffee grounds enemas and exosomes and peptide injections and doing like super dosed vitamin C, and they're doing keto and fasting or whatever. Like, the thing that is a massive difference is that they have the community that gives them the connection and gives them purpose. And it's
Yeah.
so important that you have your why in your resilience, in your longevity, that you're living your purpose, that you feel like you have a role, that you have a job on this planet, and you're fulfilling that. And when people retire, they often atrophy to what we were talking about before. They don't have the resilience, the challenges, the purpose anymore. And so it's one of the reasons why, like, I used to work for in nursing homes for about 10 years as a dietitian.
I worked as a speech pathologist in nursing homes
Oh,
for
nice.
about 5 years. Yeah.
And so that, like, in that generation, probably 90% women in the nursing home and only 10% men,
Hmm.
because men don't live as long. And I think one of the biggest reasons is in that generation, women are the nurturers, the connectors. They have a network of other women. They share their feelings. As they age in what would be retirement age, they still have their bridge club and their activities, and they're still like a matriarch in the family, and they still have their roles. They're still keeping up the house and grocery shopping and cooking and all these things. Whereas the man in this kind of archetypal role, like, was is now retired and now
Hmm.
lacks purpose and
Not
lacks
the
connection,
breadwinner
doesn't
anymore.
have the same amount of friends, and they die earlier. And I really think that's a huge predictor. And when you see these other cultures, these blue zones, they have the purpose, they have the community, they have the connection. And so that makes all the difference in how long we live.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And it's something that is very often overlooked, but the quality of your relationships cannot be definitely understated at all. And so you talk a lot in your book about your purpose and your passion and your why. And that's something, in my group coaching program, that's the first thing we do is connect to our why. A lot of people are just, they're like, well, I should, my cat just jumped down too. I thought that. So a lot of people are like, well, I need to, I want to lose weight, or I have this diagnosis. And it's like, is that going to really make you take on all these challenges that are in front of you? Is it going to make you, is it going to be strong enough to get you to be able to get rid of a lot of things that you used to love, a lot of vices, a lot of things that we use to numb, things that we use to just feel better, a lot of just things, these behaviors and foods and all that. Like, there needs to be a huge uh, why behind making all these changes that you're going to have to make. So can you talk a little bit more about the passion, purpose, and why piece of your book?
It's massive. And wherever people stand on plant medicine, that's actually been very transformative for me, like using psilocybin and some of these things in the right
Hmm.
situations where I've had facilitators. There's an environment, a container, if you will, that's created by them, that's non-judgmental. They're there as therapists, as clinicians. and they're guiding me through this process. So it's very different than just taking magic mushrooms.
At a festival
Um,
like I do? Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
Okay.
completely different.
Hmm.
There's intention setting, and then there's integration, and there's the
Yeah.
journey itself. And so for me, it was powerful to dissolve the ego and
Hmm.
get to my inner truth. And the ego through the years of our lives serves its role of protecting us, but it also prevents us.
Hmm.
It's blocking us from seeing that truth because it's always like reframing, like sometimes in ways that don't really serve us. We're rewriting that story, we're protecting ourselves from being hurt again and all this kind of stuff, and we're creating sometimes stories that really aren't true. And so getting to that inner truth where you can't get around it, like when you're in this situation, like you just can't get around it, and there's stuff that you have to move through and work through that can be difficult. Like there can be difficult conversations that you need to have after these experiences. There can be difficult moves that you need to make, therapy that you need to get to deal with a trauma, whatever. But having that truth be clear and evident and then moving towards that is so freeing, even though
Yeah.
there's like again like those moments of stress, right? But you get to the life of ease as a result. And so that can be so transformative, and that really helped me up until like I started doing plant medicine. I was in achievement mode like my whole life because I felt very insecure about who I was. I was very much like the wounded, especially like male, but I'll say male, like kind of like masculine energy, not necessarily male, gender, but like
Hmm.
it's that wounded masculine energy of like achievement, achievement, achievement. And it's always like doing, doing, doing. And the feminine energy is being,
Hmm.
and I was never in that being mode, and I wasn't happy, I wasn't like mindful, I wasn't present, I was always trying to level up and prove myself, and that gets tiring, and that gets old, and that gets exhausting. And when I got into this space, I was able to be, and I felt myself not only loving others but loving myself and granting myself grace. And that was very transformative to me to know that um, it's as simple as I can just choose love, I can be loved, and not just chase the idea of if I achieve this, then I will be loved. Like I believe like sexy is a destination when you hit a certain weight.
Hmm.
Because I was morbidly obese, I've also been anorexic and orthorexic. Or happy is an achievement when you hit a certain amount of money or a job. Or successful is an achievement when you have this title or whatever. And those are all choices that you can have right now. You can just be, speaking of that feminine energy, you can just be happy, sexy, successful right now if you just choose them. And I just didn't, it's something I didn't realize until this was just shown to me in that space, and it was like it broke me down. I'm like, wow, I can just have this. Why have I been fighting for this when it's just there?
Wow.
And so for me, like that allowed me to have my why instead of forever chasing my why.
Love that. I didn't realize you were such a guru in addition to in addition to such a nutritional professional. But I mean, this is kind of I love, thank you so much for sharing that amazing wisdom that you have really like taken. You've obviously done so much work and done so much introspection, and it's I really admire how much you've sort of gotten there, because I can definitely relate to that, being a human doing instead of a human being, perfectionistic tendencies and wanting to achieve something and then I'll be this, or look, be this weight and then I'll be feel happy in my body. And I think a lot of people listening can probably relate to, once I, get rid of my acne, then I'll be okay. Or, lose this weight, then I'll be lovable. And it it takes more work than just deciding like, oh, I love myself in this body, right? So it's not so easy to just like look in the mirror and be like, oh, I have this body that I don't feel comfortable in, but I'm supposed to love my body, so I guess I love it now. So obviously it takes a lot of work, and it takes maybe these plant medicines or different therapies and things like that to get to this place. But to know that it's possible, to know that it's within reach, is really, really important, because if we don't know it's possible, then we can't work towards it, right? Um, but I really love that idea of coming into this divine feminine where we are being, where we are accepting, and just choosing to love ourselves. And when we can do that, we can love others and be more at peace and share our gifts. And that's the place that we want to serve from, not from this like frantic grasping energy. So yeah, so good, so
Very
good.
much. And we've been taught in this society not only masculine energy, but ultra masculine energy. The Gary V idea of like not only hustle, which is sympathetic nervous system, which we have to do at times. We have to hustle for
Mhm.
sure, but hustle and grind. And
Mm,
that means like heads down, sacrificing, not living in the now for something that will eventually come supposedly. And we're miserable. And, when you think of grinding, you think of heat and smoke and pieces breaking off. And that is a lie to me. Like that is one of the greatest lies. And we've been told that we need to grind.
yeah,
And I
it's
believe that
glorified.
like it's glorified. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And now more than ever, I think we need this duality of yes, we need masculine energy. Yes, we need to hustle, but we also need to be being and be in our flow state and parasympathetic. Like the whole point of to me the hustle is to get to the flow,
Mhm.
is to get to your purpose, to get to your why, to get to where things come easy again in that states of ease. Yes, you have to have periods of dis-ease, and that's that hustle,
Mhm.
but the grind is disease. That's
Yeah.
just chronic disease to me. And so the states of flow are like when you're just living your why, living your purpose, and things are coming to you and you're manifesting them. It doesn't take a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's like all the hustle prepared you for this.
I love that. And I love this idea that I feel like there's so much duality in this, like, different topics in this conversation and in the health world as well. So we're talking about hot and cold. We're talking about getting, the beneficial stressors so we can feel that ease. We're talking about sympathetic, parasympathetic, um, building up and eating the right things and building muscle, and then intermittent fasting. So there's all this, time away, time to build, time to grow, and then there's that time to be and rest and receive. And I think that we can kind of live our lives like somewhere kind of in between, or like way too like imbalanced towards one side or the other. And it's kind of maybe dipping into both at the right times and knowing when to go into both of those things that can be really helpful. It's not like we just need to coast down the middle either, because who wants a wishy-washy, bland ass life? Like we need to, I recently just had my cat died, and so I've never had a death of someone very, very close to me. And it just like completely opened up my world to being like, this hurts so, so badly, but it really just makes you so appreciative of life. And it's just, again, once again, that duality. Like if we're just living in the middle, we're not experiencing things. And I feel like so many people are trying to like numb out with food and with, Netflix and scrolling through social media. And I'm not an exception to that. Like I also, take part in that. But it's something that we need to really take a hard look at. And, if we're finding that we're stuck, it's like these are the things that we need to have these hard conversations with ourselves, and also design a lifestyle that's going to be supportive of doing all these healthy things that will help us to feel better in the long run, and make that difficult decision, that like that's sacrifice, the waking up, taking a cold shower and journaling, all this self-care stuff, making that the default. That's what we do. Because when I was struggling, I still am, with the grief from my cat, it became extremely hard to do any sort of self-care. And so, because I don't know, it's just something that I see that people are struggling with a lot, where it's like it's not in their routine and they just can't bring themselves to do it when it really matters. So I know you talk about how important routine is and how it ties into circadian rhythm. Can we talk a little bit more about like how important that routine might be?
Yeah, yeah, that's powerful. Um, yes, so let me set up this scenario.
Okay.
You wake up, the cortisol is going, the epinephrine is going, you are stressed, you're tired because you stayed up watching a ball game or Game of Thrones or whatever it was, and we're the only species that makes ourselves stay up and be sleep deprived when we're tired. So you're exhausted, maybe you got 5 hours of sleep, you don't actually breathe that well because you're a mouth breather, and you really should be taping your mouth. That's a hack.
Mm-hmm.
So you're feeling exhausted. If you have a wearable, your HRV is tanked. You're going to reach for sugar or caffeine because your neurons, your brain cells are actually firing slower. They're acutely insulin resistant. So they're not taking up glucose for fuel as well to make ATP, the energy. So you're exhausted and you're running late because you're exhausted and you're not functioning as well, and you're going to have decision fatigue, so you're not going to make as good a decisions. You're going to fall back on what's comfortable, what you know. I'm going to work out tomorrow, I'm going to eat right tomorrow, I'm just tired today. So you get to work, you are distracted, you cannot focus, so you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're doing emails, you're agitated because you're distracted and tired. And then what do? Like, you need more sugar, more caffeine. You're holding on until lunch. And when you get pizza and Coca-Cola because, you're tired and you just need something to hold on. And then you do some more distracted work throughout the day with your emails and Facebook and Instagram and talking to other people and trying to hang on. And then, of course, you got to grab a Snickers bar and a Red Bull, and then you get in your car, you fight traffic, everyone's a jerk, everyone's cutting you off. You finally get home, you lay down on the couch, you have a beer because you're just exhausted, turn on Game of Thrones or the ball game, and that's your day. In just 10 minutes, if you give me 10 minutes, you can radically reshape your day. If you wake up to light slowly getting brighter in the room, you can buy lamps that do this. You can get apps or again, like alarm clocks or lamps that do this too, with the chimes that come in slowly and get slowly louder and closer together. And you wake up gently and you wake up naturally. And then you do some breath work. You can do box breathing, where like a 4 to 8 second box where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And you repeat that several times. And then you do some gratitude and say, I'm so thankful that I woke up next to my cat or my dog that's licking my face or my partner. I'm thankful that I have a job, that I have a computer, that I can speak English, that I can read, that I have a car, that I have friends, that I have water, that I have food. All of these things I'm so thankful for. And then affirmation, saying, I am intelligent, I am sexy, I am healthy, I am successful, I am going to have an impact today, I am going to make a new friend today, I am going to have the greatest day ever, like I do every day. You have to change the voice inside your head from the inner critic to the inner champion if you want to manifest a better life. If anyone talked to you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend. So you have to change that voice.
Yeah.
And then I get up out of bed. I do some light stretching to ground myself. It's even better if you can do it outside on the actual ground barefoot. You can get those ions from the ground and the fresh air and the sunlight and all those things. And then grab a full glass of water and hydrate your body. And now think about what you've just done in 10 minutes. How different is your day? Because again, the two things that most successful people have in common that Tim Ferriss found in Tools of Titans was that they are expert reframers, as we talked about, and they have a good morning routine. And it's because you start your day owning your day instead of your day owning you. And that changes the shape of your whole day. Now, if you go to work and do that deep work for 2 hours, now you've done all that stuff. Now you're super accomplished. You knocked out a massive task in that 2 hours. Now, if you're an intermittent faster and you're doing Dr. Sachin Panda's data where you're eating during the daylight hours, you can eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So now you have something to eat. And then when lunchtime rolls around, maybe you go take a walk instead. And now you're, accomplishing things throughout your day. You're taking your phone calls. You're enjoying your drive in traffic. Like your whole day is different, and you're going to bed at the right time, because having sleep hygiene, having a dialed in sleep routine is super important to your recovery. And you see that. And maybe you do tape your mouth. I don't know how
I
much you
do.
know about that, but
Yes.
it's important to be a nasal breather. And it's actually really good to not only do this during your sleep, but if you can, I know it would be weird at the gym to have your mouth taped, but if you're running around out in your yard or you have a home gym or some of these things, training yourself to fatigue, to be exhausted, where you might typically be a mouth breather, to being a nasal breather, you'll find that it's difficult at first, yes, kind of like all these things we talked about. But in time, you become trained to be a nasal breather and have better recovery, better oxygenation. Not only recovery day to day, but recovery between bouts. You'll recover faster, like if you're doing interval training or things like that. So those are just some simple things that, like, I'm just talking about 10 minutes. I didn't even get into like brain training and cold showers and workouts and podcasts and, all these things that are cool. Those are all amazing, but just 10 minutes. And that's like saying, it's also 10 minutes you're saying, I'm worth it. It's the self-care that's saying, like, I'm going to invest in myself. And you having your own back, again, this, like, you see this in plant medicine work a lot, where people talk about setting up boundaries and showing that you love yourself. You saying no is one of the most powerful expressions of self-love. So you doing things for yourself shows your body that it's safe and you care about it, that you're not giving away all of your power. That's where you gain sovereignty.
Yep. Boundaries are self-love. That's so profound, so important. And I love that idea of that simple 10-minute morning routine, get your day started. And you were talking about that inner critic, and sometimes we have that inner critic, and I think a lot of people also have an inner victim, and it's like,
Mm,
oh, it's a complainer, it's things are happening to you, not for you. And I
mm,
love that mantra, like, everything is happening for me, this, like, life is happening for me. And so it really takes you out of that victim mentality, and it really empowers you to do the work, to make the changes. So, yeah, your boss might be a shithead and maybe is treating you unfairly, but you still have to show up. Life is not going to treat us fairly all the time. There's going to be things that are going to be hard. And so if we're sticking in that victim mentality, like, I can't do this because XYZ, like, I can't go to the gym because whatever, like, there's a million excuses for anything, but it's about deciding that you're important enough and creating that boundary. Like, this is what I do. I watched my mom my whole entire life. We were kids, we went to the nursery at the gym, and she went to the gym. She works out, like, she and her twin sister hardcore all the time, at least 4 days a week. She feels guilty if she doesn't work out one of the days of the week, and I see that behavior modeled. And she said that that is something that she is always, that's her non-negotiable. She puts it in before everything else. You have to make time for things. You're not just going to find the time during the day, like, oh yeah, maybe I'll work out if I feel like it. If you feel like it, you're not going to feel like it, right? You're going to feel tired. There's going to be a million things. There's going to be a million reasons that your brain is going to come up with for you to not do this thing, for you to not stick with your diet. But it's about tapping into that why, that passion, that I deserve this. And what do I want my life to look like? Zooming out, look at, yeah, this cupcake might taste really good, but you know what also feels really good? What feels better than that? Like having my health, having my brain work, not having cravings all the time. So just, kind of continuing your conversation with that. But I did want to talk about, kind of shifting gears a little bit. I did want to talk a little bit about mitochondria, because that's something that, we all know from science class. It's the powerhouse of the cell. We all learned that in eighth grade biology. But can you tell us a little bit more about mitochondria? I know you talk a lot about it in your book. So maybe we can get into that convo a little bit.
It's the powerhouse of the cell. No, it really is. It's an organ. They call them organelles in the cell, but it's the same idea of an organ in the body, like your heart. It's the most similar to, let's say, the heart, actually,
Mhm.
is to your body. It's making the energy currency for your body that's known as adenosine triphosphate, ATP, which frees up these high energy phosphates to have like these reactions to release energy. And so maybe you remember like the citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, where all this is happening. And it's making that ATP and it's using that energy. And so mitochondria is, yes, cellular energy, but it's your body's energy. Like macro, it's your body's energy. You can get into what's called insufficient cellular energy states, ICE is the acronym, where you have fibromyalgia, where you have chronic fatigue syndrome, where you have hypertonic muscles, because there isn't enough energy to run the body. It's in a deficit in your brain. It's actually called brain energy gap. Like in a lot of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, that's the term they refer to. It's the same idea of insufficient cellular energy. You're not able to create enough energy to run the body to do the processes it needs. So what's going to happen? You're going to get those energy states that are too low. You're going to get oxidation, glycation, inflammation, and then chronic disease and pro-aging. And you're going to get mitochondria that are overloaded and overworked. So you'll get mitochondria dysfunction and you'll have less mitochondria. When you do healthy things, you have better mitochondrial function. You have mitochondrial biogenesis, which means it creates more mitochondria. So more energy, it's easier, bigger bucket, right? And you're also going to have less inflammation, glycation, and oxidation, which means you have less propensity towards disease and you're going to live longer. It's just that simple. Like the mitochondria are like so connected to not only our energy and livelihood, but our longevity. Our not only what's called lifespan is how long we live, but there's another term called health span, which is how long we live healthy.
Ooh,
And
that's a good
that's a
one.
very important distinction, because a lot of people are living a long time, but living with disease, living unhealthy. We want to live vibrant lives where we live with a quality health span. So that's done first and foremost with the mitochondria. When you have that dysfunction and you have that insulin resistance, that's tied to metabolic dysfunction, metabolic syndrome, and again, like your telomeres will be shorter. You have less sirtuin gene activation, and all of these things. And you are pro-aging. And you'll see that with like, there's methylation is another thing like that in the DNA that becomes an issue. So all these markers will show that you're less vibrant, that you have less of a health span. That's why I talk about in the book that it's hard to show like mitochondrial function. So a good cheap way that we don't do that would be very easy is to look at oxidation, glycation, and inflammation. And you can look at, there's a lab, oxidized LDL, hemoglobin A1C for glycation. That's a longer term blood sugar indicator, I'm sure you know.
Yep.
CRP for inflammation. And if we were just looking at these three indicators that are probably about $100, maybe twice a year, we'd have a very good picture of not only mitochondrial function, but our likelihood towards almost all disease. About 99% of diseases are non-genetic, they're metabolic, and our metabolic age, like aging biologically versus chronologically. Like, are we older biologically than we are chronologically, or younger? And so we could look at that snapshot, but we only look at like CRP once you've had a heart attack. We only look at hemoglobin A1C once you have diabetes. We don't look at these things proactively, no surprise.
Right.
So mitochondria, obviously critically important. I have a lot of supplements and ideas in the book around how to improve mitochondrial resilience. There's actually a term called mitohormesis,
Mm-hmm.
that specifically is hormetic stressors for the mitochondria. And there's even not only autophagy, which is that cellular detox, but there's actually mitophagy, where it's the detoxing or cleanup of the mitochondria. So there's a lot of research going into mitochondrial health for sure, and for good reason.
Yeah. Awesome. We're definitely going to have to check out your book to learn about all of those other interesting things that we can do to up our mitochondrial game. And real quickly, I know that you worked with in the supplement field, and um, there's some things that you know about the supplement industry that I would love if you could just share a few little nuggets, because supplements are, I think that they're extremely important for healing. For example, if we don't have enough betaine HCl stomach acid, then we can't absorb zinc, but zinc is needed to create stomach acid. So, you're kind of in that situation where supplementation can be extremely helpful. It can fast track healing, it can optimize and upgrade your health. But there's a lot of crappy supplements out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of information that you know. So, can you impart any wisdom on us about the supplement industry?
Yeah, for sure. I would say one of the biggest frustrations for me is something called proprietary blends. A lot of companies will say it's for intellectual property reasons that they're protecting it, that they list 20 ingredients in this blend and they list one dose, but don't believe it. Don't buy supplements with proprietary blends. They, by law, just have to list them in order of descending mass, which means the one that has the most amount of milligrams to the least. And so it could just be, let's say there's 15 ingredients in the 700 milligram blend. You could have one ingredient that's 699 milligrams and then have the other 14 ingredients be 1 milligram. This is a real thing that they're allowed to do, so
Wow.
that they can list all these ingredients that you're like, oh, wow, I see this one and that one. And like, I'm sure they're all in there, they're appropriate doses. It's got to be effective.
No.
Nope.
Wow.
No, that's not necessarily the case. And so supplements that have proprietary blends, I ditch. I would say that I also trust the established brands. I mean, that's just like Thorne, Designs for Health, Standard Process, Now Foods, Giro, Life Extension Foundation, Nordic
Right.
Naturals, Carlson's, Barleans. These companies that have been around a long time, that have 20-year reputations, they're established, they have good quality control programs, they have huge R&D and quality control departments. That makes a massive difference. Like, sometimes companies are new and they don't even know what they don't know. Like, sometimes this is actually mistakes of ignorance and not necessarily malicious mistakes.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, having run these departments where I had 15 people doing this, it takes a lot of work to do this testing. Like you do stability work to see if like it still meets label claim 2 years in the full shelf life. You're doing blending work and testing out the ingredients to see what happens when they're blended together. Is there interactions? You're doing raw material qualification to make sure that ingredient actually tests out the way that manufacturer from China or whoever says it does, that it doesn't have the things in it it's not supposed to, and it tests for the actives that it is supposed to. And then you're doing testing once it is blended and manufactured to make sure it hits the label claim. And sometimes you need overages to do that. And there's just so much work that goes into all of this. And then there's even things like how long do the flavors last, or their odors, or, does it pull in moisture? And, what do you need to add to like make it stable in that way? So there's a lot of work that goes in. And a lot of these companies just don't know how to do that, don't have the ability to do that, don't have the teams or expertise to do that. So that's where I rely upon like the better companies that have been around a while. Doesn't mean like the new guys can't have a good company. It's possible, but it's definitely easier for me to recommend the established ones. And then I would also say that companies that make ridiculous claims like 880% more testosterone or, whatever, it's very easy to manipulate data from
Yeah.
studies and like look at like the placebo group, let's say, is 0.05% change, and then the experimental group is 0.4% change. Neither one is statistically relevant, but one is 800% more. So it's manipulative data.
Yeah.
And so I don't trust companies that do that kind of stuff either. And you don't see the trusted companies that have been around a long time doing that crazy stuff. So, and the last thing I would say is you can call these companies the good companies and actually get your testing results for your lot. You can ask them about their quality control programs. And if they get sketchy and they don't want to answer, there's something to be said for that.
Well, that's really helpful information. So thanks for sharing. I'm very, the proprietary blend, there are some companies that might say it's a, maybe it's a proprietary blend, but they will list out the weight and the amount of milligrams. Is that okay? Or,
Yeah, if it's possible, it's
okay.
possible, but like what you want is like full disclosure where I like where each ingredient is listed for its, if it's a plant, then it has the genus and species, it has the plant part.
Hmm.
So it's important, like let's say if it's ginseng, that it's the root, because that's where the efficacy is. And a lot of
Mm.
times you'll get companies trying to save money by using the rest of the whole plant that's cheap, but it still contains
Oh,
ginseng. So there's a lot of deceptive things that they can do. And, if they're not testing DNA, like the species, then you can also get sometimes, like, for example, with cinnamon that's more expensive, you can get it so they spike it with green tea polyphenols that are cheap. So it tests higher as cinnamon with polyphenols. So there's like a lot of games that are played, like, again, like where I like where it's full disclosure, it's listed, genus and species, plant part, what it's standardized to, the active compound, and then the dose that it has.
got
So
it.
all that is clear to you as the consumer, but also as the company, they have to test to all of those things, each one of those things. Whereas the proprietary blend company, they don't need to test to anything because they're just listing 1 milligram dose.
Interesting. Wow, that's really great information. So thanks for sharing that. I knew that you had some good insight there. A little bit off our topic, but I think it's good information. So, Shawn, your book is called The Energy Formula. Where can people buy it? Where can people find you?
Yes, thank you. It's on energyformula.com. I not only have a link to Amazon, iBooks, Barnes and Noble, all that kind of stuff, but I also have all the bonuses there. The hidden chapter on natural movement that I was talking about with exercise snacks and
Yes.
all of that, but also a fasting for energy guide that goes into all the different archetypes or avatars that you can have, like if you're a woman, how the fasting would be different than if you're a man. If you're a woman that's postmenopausal, how it would be different, et cetera. I get into all those kinds of things. And then I have Q&As available, recipe books, just tons of stuff on there. I also have ShawnWells.com, SHAWN. that has like all these guides on supplements and immune health and mushrooms and zinc and all those kinds of cool things. At Shawn Wells on Instagram, again, SHAWN. And then I'm on Clubhouse at Biohacking. So
Awesome.
I'm around and I'm here to support the book. The hardcover is full color front to back with like 60 diagrams. It has the chapter summaries that you're talking about. It has surveys to assess your progress. It has the scientific citations. It has these formulators corners that go into all the supplements, resource hacks that go into all the like devices and apps and techniques. It's just chock full of stuff that you can open up like for 2 minutes and learn something. So
Wow.
I'm proud of it. There's an ebook, there's the hardcover, and then I did an Audible that with my voice that's unabridged. That's about 8 hours long. So it's
That's
all
great.
available.
That's
Yeah.
awesome, Shawn. And you are certainly the achiever for sure. I don't know if you know the Enneagram, but maybe you're a three. Are you familiar with
I am.
Enneagram? Yeah. Are you a three? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. As a one, I wish I could, it's almost like we wish we could be threes. But thank you for doing all this work. Thank you for sharing what you do. And I'm really excited. Like I said, if you're one of my clients and you're listening to this, you're going to have homework, and that's to read Shawn's book. And then anyone new who's going to work with me, it's going to be required reading, because I love the message that you're sharing. We're speaking the same language, but you have much more wisdom and experience than I do. So thank you for sharing all of that. And thanks for coming on the show. It was great.
Thank you for sharing your platform with me. And it was an amazing conversation. And this is a two-way street, and you bring out the best in me. So thank you.
Thanks, Shawn. All right. Talk to you soon.